Hey guys, Coach Keith Kapner here. Gonna make a video for you today. This one, I'm gonna be responding to a question from an awesome subscriber of the channel. If you aren't subscribed already, please do so. It's from Intellectual Great 8693. Asked a question a few days ago on the Crawford Spence video that I did. If you haven't watched it, make sure you watch it. Good. They said, good analysis of the fight. Question: you said that leading with a jab to initiate offense is important, but can be too repetitive at times. Should a fighter sometimes lead with a cross or lead hook to be less repetitive? What would you recommend them to do to not be predictable? So I want to do a video on my response as well as flesh out these points. I have 8 items here. All right, gang. So first off, what can you do besides the jab? I know I'm kind of cheating by saying jab, but the caveat is multi-jabs. It's phenomenal and amazing, and it never ceases to honestly surprise me every couple of years when for a moment in my mind, even though I coach boxing all the time and tell people to throw multiple jabs, it's like, dang, one jab's not working, one jab's not working. Oh my goodness, you threw 2 jabs in a row. You threw 3 jabs in a row, and it disrupted that person, and that person's a decent fighter, and they still got disrupted by multi-jabs. So doubling and tripling your jab is the first answer of, besides just starting off with a jab, having double, triple jabs, which, like for instance with Spence, I believe he did that in that fight. But regardless, if you're having trouble, you're starting with that jab to initiate your attack, because that's basic boxing, that's foundational boxing, and you're getting countered off that jab or things are happening. Try doubling and tripling it up, sometimes quadrupling it. Sometimes I've thrown 5 jabs in a row, sometimes even 6. All right, and you need to practice the footwork with that jab and steps, but that's for another video. Jab timings, all right? So that's another important aspect of changing it up. Because think about it, if I throw a jab, always, it's gonna be one jab, let's say, and it's always at the same timing, then you can read it. Changing your timings, there's some good fighters nowadays that are excellent at this, as well as fighters in the past. So for instance, you can have a slight delay on the delivery, basically almost kind of breaking the rules a little bit, right? Because you want your jab to be no tell, no obvious aspect to it that it's going to be coming. So you don't want to be kind of like leaning and jabbing, or like picking your foot up high before you jab, because your opponent can see that foot leave the ground before you step. Leaning back, let's say, before you launch off with a jab, things like that. But there's a few different ways you can use that to change the timing, as well as arm position. I'm going to talk about that for a second. All right, so the first one is, again, kind of breaking the rules, but I've used this and I've seen it work a lot, where it's a little bit of a lean forward, bam. So it's almost like you're just a slow boom, and then the jab shoots off of that. That's one. Another one is the position of your hand with the timing, obviously besides the velocity of the fist, right? I can throw a jab a little slower, a little faster, and change it up. But if you start your jab, let's say, from here versus maybe here, it's gonna be a little faster. And it changes the read on people on how quick that comes. Also, when you double jab, let's say, you need to be able to fundamentally, in my opinion, bring it all the way back every time. You need to be able to double and triple a jab all the way out from this stance. But you also then sometimes should break the rules according to me and just have it out here, have it out there, and that changes the timing on that double jab. So think about it. Sometimes it's all the way from here. Sometimes it's just that kind of pokey jab from that position. 2 different aspects on that on changing the timing. Now, also, you can change your jab delivery, or rather your jab places that it hits. Make it different places that you're going to connect that shot across the street from the fire department. So think about that. If you're always, oh man, that's something big that I've seen a lot. People get challenged by, and when you step up in levels as a boxer, if you don't get this right, you're gonna run into trouble, because you'll be shooting your jab out and you'll be like, man, I'm jabbing like coach said, I'm changing, double, tripling, and I'm changing timings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but you're jabbing the same 2 places. You're jabbing their head and you're jabbing their body, let's say, and that's it. That's all you're doing. And if you're always just jabbing straight for someone's skull, as you get up levels in boxing, it's not gonna be good enough. If you're always just jabbing just for the body and just for the head, that's not good enough. So think about it as levels, right? First is just jabbing and doing, like I'm saying, multiple jabs really, and changing up timings, things of that nature. But then not only jabbing the face, but then also jabbing the body. Then once you're jabbing the face and the body, then there's other aspects to that as well, because all the shots can be countered. and be dealt with. But what can make it more tricky for somebody is when you're jabbing the shoulders. Why would you ever jab someone's shoulders? Because you're going to be controlling them and shutting down different aspects of their game. If you're always just jabbing for the body, let's say to stop head movement, it's not going to be as effective and it leaves you more open than if you were to shoot for the shoulders and the chest, because that's going to cut down and still give them something to deal with. Think about it. If you're slipping punches like this and someone's shooting shots right past you, it's easy. It encourages you to keep slipping and you can counter them off of that head movement. Now, if I'm doing this and you're hitting me in the shoulders or the chest, you're choking me, you're stopping me, you're creating my motor, you're making my motor stutter and not allowing me to get my rhythm going and controlling me, man. And if you control my body, you control what I do, right? You control the head, you control what they do. But what's an amazing thing is when you start hitting those points, also too, in my mind, if you're doing that to me, I might forget that that jab might be coming from my face next time and you get me next time. I've seen that play out time and time again in the next level of boxing, where someone's jabbing, let's say someone's lead shoulder, boom, face. Because it lulls them to, okay, shoulder, boom, hit in the face. There's a lot of aspects like this. Again, could go into a lot more, but we're running through these 8 points in one video. Feints of the jab. So what I talked about earlier, different timings. The first one I talked about, a little bit of lean and boom. You could almost like say that's a feint. Not quite, but different, but simply feinting the jab, such an important aspect. Whether you feint a jab down for the body and then you jab it up top, you feint it up top, drop it down for the body, feint the start, simply that, feint the start. Because think about it, if you're boxing somebody, or let's say someone's boxing you and you can tell every time they're about to start. So even though they're always throwing jabs, let's say to initiate an attack, that might be fine if they can disguise when it's starting by not having a telegraph jab, but also by having one that you don't know when it's going to come. So again, you kind of get lulled into falling asleep. You say, okay, I saw them start a jab, it wasn't a jab that time. They started a jab, wasn't that, bam, it was a jab that time. Very important concept. Practice your feinting. One simple tip on feinting is don't do a Street Fighter type feint where you go like that with your head, because you don't start a punch like that. You want to start the movement, whether it's a little shift of the body, a little shift of the feet, or a little shift of the hand. You don't need to like go through the full extension of the punch to feint the punch necessarily. Because think about it, when you're a boxer, what are you reading? You're reading that first few inches of the delivery. And that first few inches of delivery gets you enough, and also you don't want to overcommit with your feint, because you might as well have just thrown a punch at that point. And it'd be a setup punch. All right, different leads. Like Intellectual Greg talked about different leads. Should you throw them? Absolutely. And that's where not too far along your boxing journey, you do need to be able to have different leads. If it's always the jab, and even if you master these different aspects, you will actually maybe almost make this point null and void for quite a bit. But different leads adds a whole nother fifth layer of 5 dimensions to what you're doing. And it makes it very hard to deal with, and it will actually make it so your jab is more effective. Because if sometimes you're leading with the right hand, and then it's a jab sometimes, man, I got to worry about 2 different elements, as well as the different timings and the feints and everything else that you're working with your jab. If it's a lead hook sometimes, that is one of the bread and butters of, at least when I box, is I'm jabbing, I'm doing my thing, I maybe feint a jab, left hook, or maybe I just lead with a left hook, and if I've jabbed enough, it's set the stage that you see that left arm move, you see my body come at you, and it's actually me stepping in with a left hook. As long as I keep my chin down, I can be relatively safe while doing it. So different leads, very important. Now, that's where you need practicing your shadow boxing, being able to throw a lead shot without a big tell, all right? Because that is one reason as well why most boxing coaches, I would venture to say all boxing coaches, say it is generally a good idea to start with a jab the majority of the time. That is a truism in boxing. Now, the reason why that is, one of the reasons, obviously like we know it's the safest punch to throw, it's the least committal punch to throw, right? You're not opening up your body or twisting, and there's less chance of a lean. It's also the punch closest to their face, so it gets to the quickest, it's hard to see. When you try to maybe lead with the right hand, that can be easy to see, depending how you do it. And same thing with the left hook, depending how you do it, which can make it very dangerous. All right, typically with different leads though, you want to lead probably with a right hand or a left hook. You don't typically want to lead with an uppercut. Uppercuts typically thrown in a combination or as a counter punch, typically, okay? Now, feinting different leads, again, talking about the feint of that. So we talked about the jab, the feint of the jab, different leads, feinting those different leads. and knowing what things set up. And so for instance, if I set up, or rather if I feint a hook, what does that generally open up? That generally opens up something, a straight path down the middle. If I feint a straight shot, that's going to generally open up a path around, all right? And again, when you're feinting, you also need to be gathering information about your opponent. So don't feint someone and have it locked in your brain that like, yo, I'm gonna do this feint, and that's gonna set up this shot. Like there are general things like that will occur, but what you need to be paying attention to is that, for instance, example, some people, you throw a hook, and they tend to always kind of open up like that and block it. Some people are always trying to go under hooks. When hooks start coming, they kind of go under. So right there, you need to be gathering data, for instance, and saying, okay, I shoot my hook, you notice they're like that. Now you know, feint the hook right hand. Let's say they're always kind of crouching down when the hook comes. You know, feint the hook uppercut, because that's what they're dropping into, all right? Or, last one for you on the hook, for instance, they're always pulling out of hooks. It might still be a right hand, a two, but it also might be a jab. It might be a feint the hook, they kind of lean back, pull out, boom, you stab them with that jab. Okay, so now this red line here is delineating really not punches that are different things to start, different things to do with their punches, but more of like body positional aspects, as well as almost like countering, all right? That's really the red line is talking almost more about setting up counters or creating opportunities that allow you to counter, that allow you to start different, all right? So, head and hand defense with or without footwork, all right? So for instance, a classic example of this is a more, people say like Mexican style, whatever, but it's just a style of coming forward with the hands, the high guard or higher guard, kind of like a Canelo type thing, or like when Mayweather beat up McGregor, and closing the gap, walking in, creeping in, blocking, absorbing punches on your gloves, and essentially using that to set up a counter. That's another way to do an attack. Because if you're always in a position with someone that's always jumping out and creating space with every shot that you do and every lead that you attempt, because you could be doing all this, I've been here, I've had many fighters been here, where you're doing most all of these 6 items, and it's just the way that this person's maneuvering everything else, they're making space faster than you can really set any of these things up. You can do things with your body that help create the attack by, like I said, higher guard, walking them down a little bit, so therefore your initial start point is much closer than it would be from more of an outside boxing perspective, and you can land the shots you want, or position them, maneuver them in the ring, get them into a spot where you can get them. Then you have like head defense, which means, you know, head movement and things of that nature. Sometimes, even if it's almost like a feint, it really is, there's kind of like a gray area here, but if I slip over here, even if it wasn't with a punch, I go over there, that looks like a right hand feint, but it's also just a boxing movement that gets me offline, and as long as I come back with something, it can be effective. And you can also think about it in terms of using that as a counter move, right? You slip a right hand, you slip a jab, whatever, you come back, bam. You drop levels, and you didn't even move your hand, you drop levels, and it looks like you're doing something to the body. You're not necessarily feinting a body shot, it just looks like you're doing something down there, brings their eyes down, sometimes brings their guard down, all right? That's one thing. A move I did personally a lot as a shorter boxer is a quick drop down, and I didn't even feint a jab or anything. It was just quick drop down. A lot of times people would go like this, and then it would get you something up top. And then with or without feet, like I said, kind of walking down, maybe moving back even. And you can talk about with the feet, for instance, as well. I've had a couple boxers that have been able to do this. I never personally did this when I box, but again, as coaches, we all do our best to help our fighters do things that we didn't even do or could do, right? Because not every coach was a great fighter. Most great fighters don't make great coaches. So, lulling them in with your feet, let's say. So I give the example of someone always moving away, but sometimes even if they're always moving away, if you start moving back, stepping outside of their range, they're going to keep on doing what? Keep on coming forward. So now the person that was jumping back, you're luring them into coming forward, and it's very hard to switch gears, okay? And once you get them in that gear of coming forward, then you, as the person that's trying to deal with this person, trying to get away from you, bam, you go after it, right? Or the opposite, right? Because again, my mind goes right for the short person, right? Because that's what 5'8", doing middleweight. Now, if you're a longer person, think about this. If you're always maneuvering, lateral back, circling off, making space, and your opponent keeps on trying to come at you. Think about it, with a little bit of time, if you keep on doing those things, within reason, you keep on doing those things, they might start to step a little bit further, right? They might start to leap in because you're doing these repetitive movements going backwards, let's say, and they start to overcome that valley. That's where sometimes, even as a longer person, you need to be able to actually push that shorter person back. I know it almost sounds like sacrilege, but be able to close the gap and push them back a little bit, get them on their back foot, and then now man, I tell you, I've had some people do that to me, and it's trouble because if they're always running, again, like I said, you can start building up a plan, building up these tools, start adjusting. But then sometimes they close the gap, or sometimes they're pushing you back. You got to change your gears, and it's hard to change gears mentally and physically. All right? Again, boxing is all about making your opponent uncomfortable and making yourself comfortable and landing more shots. Last one, body positions. Again, this is kind of luring feints, but it can also be used earlier on for different leads. Because if you keep your standard boxing stance, which again is your foundation, it's your house, and it's what you need to go back to time and time again, and the more you get away from it, the more trouble you're gonna have. But you need to keep your foundation, but also set up different things off that foundation, so different body positions, or another way it's called in boxing is different looks, right? Give them different looks. Whether it's more of a high guard position for a little bit of time, a little bit of a lean forward to lure certain shots, leaning back, et cetera, maybe more of an open position where you're here, and then off of that position, you can actually land a powerful hook very fast. You can land the right hand faster because it's closer, and sure, you are inviting things, but you need to understand what you're inviting and be ready to counter those things, or at least deal with those things. So body positions is the last one. I could go a lot more into that, but I'm not going to. We got 8 items here. Hopefully this is a good fleshed out answer for Intellectual Great, who asked a great question. Watch out for the next video, guys. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share for more videos like this. And keep on training, keep on shadowboxing, keep on striving to be your best self.